So welcome to tonight's lecture. Those who have made the effort to show up, we are going to be covering Peace Power. Focus on the knight. Very fancy title for today. So the goal is to cover all things knight related. We are going to cover a bit of practical endgames that are involving knights. But Vinnick compared knight endings to pawn endings. In fact, many of their characteristics are almost identical. An active king or an outside passed pawn brings a clear advantage in both types of endings. Despite that, knight endings are noticeably harder to play. The defending side has more chances of success, even if the opponent has an advantage in material. Knight combinations, we will also cover. These are more of our tactical and flashy moves, because the knight is a very valuable attacking piece, which can simultaneously control various squares within a defined radius. The knight is a close quarters fighter, so it has to get close to opposing pieces, because only then can it show what it can achieve. In general, the knight needs support from other pieces. It is also very good at cooperating with such forces. Okay, and then lastly, we'll cover outposts for knights. So for those of you who were at last week's lecture by Anito, we looked at, I think, weak squares. I think it was mainly weak squares, which, okay, is mainly what we are going to need for outposts. A description here reads, a knight becomes dangerous when it gets close to the opposing pieces. To do so, it often needs the support of a pawn or a piece. But when the knight is on a protected square, it can develop its capacities to the full extent. A knight in an outpost position is dangerous to the defending side for several reasons. The knight can provide very strong backup for an attack. The knight itself can become active at any moment. And the knight controls important squares deep in the opposing camp, thus hindering effective coordination between the defensive pieces. Frequently, the only option for the defense is to get rid of such a knight at any cost, even if it means sacrificing material. Okay, that was quite a mouthful. I did steal some of this description. Some of it I wrote myself, but most of it was stolen from people a lot smarter than me. I am showing my screen, right? Yeah. Okay, fantastic. Let's get things started. I thought we'd start by looking at the knight endgames and then get to the more exciting stuff towards the end, so everyone doesn't fall asleep on me. First game we're going to look at is a game of Artur Yusupov's against Vasily Ivanchuk. Yusupov has stopped playing. Ivanchuk, I think, still plays some stuff, but he's definitely past his prime. Let's maybe skip the start of this game because I don't feel like discussing openings. We get a position. Let's maybe talk from here. Trades. Okay, so we have an endgame. We have a knight and 5 pawns each. I'd like you guys to spend some time considering the position and then come up with an evaluation of the position, who we think is better and what the plan is going to be. You have any thoughts, Rowan?
This is tricky, because it sort of looks even. My initial thought is that black's are already attacking white's pawn, which means white is forced to move the pawn, which might give him. No, it doesn't actually really give him anything because his king can't come out. King can't come to the f8 square and get active because the knight's blocking it. So I think white might have it. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, no, thank you for that attempted answer. Afri Visa, if I'm saying your name correctly. You got any thoughts on the position? You're welcome to unmute yourself or just type an answer.
No, not at all. Not really an advanced player. Just here to learn and just
okay.
comprehend as much as I can. Thanks.
No, it's great to have you then. So Cuthbert, you still with us or you getting food? No. Okay. Oh, that is interesting thoughts that were given. This position is, I think, very interesting because we have a symmetrical structure, same amount of pawns, same amount of pieces. The one imbalance that I think Rowan mentioned is that this pawn is going to come up the board. And we have to evaluate if that's going to be a strength or a weakness. So with the pawn more advanced, it's more likely to become a weakness. And that, I think, becomes clear very quickly. Because what black does in this game is he just starts pressuring the pawn. So white is forced to play a4. This move is forced. There's no other option. Black then chooses to play knight b2. The pawn is forced forward once more. Then he plays knight c4, and the pawn is forced forward to a6. Okay, so now the position has already changed, and this is all
Do you
from...
mind if I ask a question?
Yes, Ron?
Because this was what I initially thought the pawn has to go off the board, but when you play knight to b2, right? Can't you just play knight c5?
Knight c5, protecting it. I'm presuming black's king is too close, right? Like, let's just say we play king to f8 now. If white brings his king in,
You're saying
we're too quick.
First. Yeah.
And the knight gets kicked away. Knight endings, I think in our introduction, we described them as being very similar to pawn endings, which is true. They're like pawn endings, but they're harder to calculate. And a lot of it revolves around accurately calculating the position, which, okay, sometimes general principles can't get us everywhere. But that is something that does need to be noted. So the pawn is indeed forced up the board. And now how should black continue? Now that we have forced the pawn forward, what should be black's logical plan in any endgame, not just knight endings?
I'll bring the king in to take it.
We very much need the king in the endgame. The king in the endgame is a very important piece. We always discuss what's the value of the king. It's a kind of a difficult question. Some people, the value of the king is infinite. The strength of the king we usually say is about 4 now. It's about 4 points because it can be a very strong fighting piece in the endgame. So you want to be using it the moment it's not at risk of being checkmated. So the way black can bring his king into this game is he plays f5. He could also play f6, I think, but the general idea is just to bring the king to f7. White brings his king in, black brings his king in, king e2, king e7. There is some interesting variations I have in my notes here, but we'll maybe get to them a bit later. Knight comes to c5. Black king keeps marching on, and the knight comes to b7. Okay, so now again we need to start calculating. Can black just play king c6 and king b6 and go take that a pawn? Is that a possibility? Because if we can, that solves a lot of our problems. We did mention at the start that having a pass pawn is often decisive, and especially a rook's pawn, because knights are very, very bad at stopping rook's pawns. Because to stop a rook pawn with a knight, your knight can only stop it from one side, right? Whereas then your king can just chase the knight away and the pawn will move forward. If, let's say, it's a central pawn, a knight can stop it a lot easier, because your knight can stop it from either one of the sides. We could be stopping this pawn from both of these sides, and the king will struggle to chase our knight away. Yeah, black can't exactly go and take this pawn, because if he tries going king c6, okay, king c6 maybe isn't the best move. So if he goes king c7, then the white king can just march forward with king d3. And after something like knight e5, king d4, we chase the knight a bit, and our king is able to come into c5, and now we've saved our a6 pawn. So this is not on black's to-do list. He would like to hunt down that pawn maybe at a later date. So he plays king d5. He is the more active king. Black is clearly the person trying to win this position. White plays f3. Somebody tell me why f3 is played. There's 2 reasons.
The first reason that comes to my mind is to keep the king out.
Yeah, that is definitely reason number 1. We don't want to allow king e4. Can we think of a second reason? All good moves in chess need to have 2 reasons.
Is it to potentially break with either g4 or e4 when the king comes to e3?
Yeah, the pawn break is very important. And it's also why we're playing the pawn break that needs to be understood. We want to trade off pawns. White is clearly not trying to win this position. He is going to be happy if he can make a draw. when you want to make a draw, you want to trade pawns, not necessarily pieces. If you have a good position, often you can exchange pieces and you'll still win in a pawn ending or a more simplified position. Trading pawns will almost always benefit the person trying to defend the position. Black chooses to play e5, which, okay, there is some analysis here that talks about e5 being a bad idea. And the main reason e5 isn't so good is it allows the exchange of pawns. White chooses to break with g4. Black holds it together with g6. And now white starts maneuvering with knight d8. And this is now where white starts to try and get active. His knight on b7 has been quite passive up until now. Activity is one of the most important things of these endings. Black chooses to play knight d6. He plays knight d6 to stop the knight coming to c7, where it will start harassing the black pawns. We get g takes f5, g takes f5, and white pushes h4. We're pushing h4 because the more advanced this pawn is, it's not really accessible by the black king just yet. And if we can push it to h5, maybe there's counterplay at targeting this h6 pawn at a later date, and the pawn gets fixed. White chooses to, again, after black plays king c5, now white breaks with e4. What is happening if black takes twice on e4? Does black not have two attackers, one defender? Two is more than one, right? Not a maths lecture, but that is one secret I can share with you. Any ideas? If black takes twice on e4, what is white's plan of continuation? If you don't want to...
He just plays knight to f7, forking the two pawns.
Yeah, simple is best, right? F takes e4, f takes e4. This was played. Knight takes e4 wasn't played, but knight f7 leads to quite an easy draw. And you're often going to see ideas like this where the pawns get blockaded and then the knights just attack them from behind when the pawns can't move. Black chooses though to go king b6. He is dreaming of getting that past rook's pawn. That would be very desirable for him. White plays king d3. The plan with king d3 is he wants to now win the e-pawn and get counterplay of his e-pawn. There is, however, a mistake here in my notes. Do I have this variation? King f3 is annotated as a blunder. Can we work out why king f3 is a blunder, but king d3 was a good move? King f3 is planning to go after the h-pawn. That part is clear. But why is it a bad move?
Is it just because your king's going to be on the opposite side of the passed rook pawn?
I mean, we'd have a passed rook's pawn of our own, right? If we just, let's say, take on a6.
Like two moves behind.
Okay, I think let's play some moves. Let's see how this goes. If we just run with, let's say, king d4, and okay, it's pretty clear that black is faster, right? And our knight's not really in a position to stop it. So that seems quite good.
Oh, but what you could do is stop that completely with h5.
h5, yeah. And this is one of the variations that is given. I think h5 is actually the critical move. If black plays h5 here, he stops the white king coming in. And I think h5 is very strong. But the main reason I included this variation is that after king takes a6, white is not lost. How is white supposed to continue here? We know king b4, we're too slow. The first rule, I'm going to give more advice here. If you want to win a race, only enter races where you have a head start. Because if you enter this pawn race, you're going to lose. There's a very nice defensive idea white can do here, and that's just playing knight c6. Yeah, knight c6 is so good because we are almost at the point where we're willing to give up our knight for that a pawn. There's a variation given of knight f7, king g4, knight b6, and then we just take on a7. And after king takes a7, now it's almost white that's trying to win, purely because this king is so far out of play. The white king is active. So in this position, black is up a full knight, but black is down a king, right? This king is completely out of the game. So this is a variation that could have happened. Obviously in the game, instead of king f3, they went king d3, which is a lot more shall we say, reserved move, but handles everything a lot better. Now, if black takes on a6, we will again most likely see, I think it's knight to c6, and there's pressure on the e pawn, and the white king gets very active. So black chooses to play king b5. And there's a little symbol if you're looking at the moves on the side there. That symbol means it's fine. Basically what it means. And this is another theme we're going to see in knight endings a lot. And that's because knights cannot waste a tempo. Often if you have a bishop, let's say you have a bishop on this diagonal, moving it one square forward is often fine. But in knight endings, knights cannot waste a move. There's a lot of, I think there's always that theoretical end game. I don't have it here where you put the king in the corner and then the knight can't chase him out because it's on the wrong color. Maybe I should have had that, but hey, I think some of you will get what I'm meaning. White is forced to play h5. It's really the only thing he can do. Black again waits with king b6. Now, what black's plan is okay, now you have to make a move. If you move your king to the left, you're losing your e pawn. If you play king e3, then suddenly the black king starts infiltrating. So it's not immediately clear what white should do. White finds this nice defense with knight to e6. After king takes a6, he plays knight c5. The knight gets active, and after king b5, knight d7. He calculates how to get his knight to target the e pawn, and the activity of the knight will allow him to draw. All right, the knight comes to f7. We get the king to stop the rook's pawn. King c6. The knight comes to f6, staying active. We are threatening to maybe come to g4 and keep pressure on both the pawns. King comes up to c5, knight d7, king b5, knight back to f6. White understands that he is trying to draw. a6, knight d7 again. There's actually a rule for knight endings. I believe it's, if there's, let's say, I think it's up to 4 pawns. Even if you're down a pawn, it's usually a draw if there's like 3 or 4 pawns on the board. If there's more than 3 or 4 pawns, then you're losing the endgame. The reason for that is often in these endings, you can just sacrifice the knight and get drawn position. King c6 again, knight f6. They flirt with repeating. Then black tries to get his king involved. Knight comes back to d7, king b5, knight f6 again, and the game does just peter out in a few moves. After white is willing to temporarily give up the pawn, but then he gains counterplay if he's h pawn and finishes it with a nice fork. Okay, so this is just a relatively basic example. I think it is nice to see how white, or black rather, did try to make an attempt at winning this endgame. If we go back to the start here, this ending is very equal. If we put this pawn on a2, it's probably just we would never see this game because there would be nothing to write home about. But the fact that black chooses to force the pawn forward and makes it a target, there becomes a lot of ways that white could go wrong in the position. And I think a lot of, say, younger or less experienced players, they get these positions where they're slightly better, but there's no obvious way to win, and then it just fizzles out to a draw quite quickly. One of my games, I think I had a very pleasant position fighting against an isolated pawn, and I didn't really play it well, and the position just fizzles out. Good players, they find a way to grind. They find a way to get that 1%. Black tried that here, but it didn't quite work out for him. Let's look at another practical endgame before we get on to the more exciting stuff. So this is white to play in this position. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of time, and then I want some thoughts. Now that we've seen how the previous one did play out, maybe we have a bit better understanding. Again, I'm not necessarily looking for some cool tactics. I'm just looking for an understanding of the position, an understanding of what both sides are trying to achieve.
I would say just the fact that the white king is just closer into the black's camp is just an added advantage.
Yeah.
Something it's just useful to be closer in this position.
No, that is a very good observation. And I think it's probably the main imbalance, right? If we look, both have 5 pawns all on the same files. There's no real opportunity for a pass pawn, but the one glaring thing that stands out is the more active king for white.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, Rowan, go for it.
The thing is that A move that white cannot prevent is b6 checks, which actually forces the king back. However, does leave black's pawns a little bit more advanced than if they were on their starting square.
Yeah,
Meaning
that b6 is always going to play a part of this position. But even after b6 and our king is forced back to the 4th rank, the king is still more active, right? It's not
yes.
as appealing as on the 5th rank, but it's still, we're ranked further than our opponent's king is going to be. So those are, I think that's most of the observations I wanted out of this. So thank you very much for that. The one other factor I would give is we didn't give enough credit to it being white's move and the placement of the knights. So white's knight here is on the 3rd rank, has potential to come forward to the 5th rank and potentially target black's pawns with knight e5 or knight g5. I think who's a Jeremy Silman, he always has this saying that knights are the psychopaths of the chessboard. They're always unpredictable in that, but he talks a lot about how if your knight's on the 5th rank, it's an attacking piece. Any knight before the 5th rank, it's a purely defensive piece. I think for like the 4th rank, he says it can attack or something, but knights in the other half of the board are more aggressive. And that is also a big part of this position. So in this position, Botvinnik is playing white and he comes off knight g5, threatening the pawn. The pawn comes forward to f6 and he goes knight h7. We're seeing this very similar idea to the previous example. He's kind of goading the opponent's pawns forward so that he can fix the weakness and then to try and target it. Black plays f5. White needs to fix this weakness. How can we fix black's weaknesses now?
You play f5.
F4.
F4, I mean.
Or h4 are actually two options, right? So now, which do you think we should play, f4 or h4? It might not feel like it makes a difference, but I think it actually does.
Yeah, you need to be careful because like f4, if black's knight ever potentially gets to d6 or something, it can attack it.
Yeah, d6 or maybe even d5, right?
Not d6, d5, e6, d5. Yeah, sorry, letters.
That is one thing. There's probably another reason why h4 is better, and I'm wondering if we can see it. So with f4, we potentially take away a square that we could use. So potentially our king is going to need to come target these weaknesses. If we have the pawn on f4, it's kind of hard for our king to head this way. If we have the pawn on h4, our king can use f4, maybe even our knight uses f4 one day. So it's just having the vacant square is a bit more important. But okay, I think there's actually a variation here. After f4, b6, king d4, king d6, knight f8, pressuring the pawn on b6, knight c6 check, king e3, knight e7, and black can hold the position. In this game, we are going to see why h4 is slightly more beneficial, which because h4 was played. And I think black understands that he is already in a lot of trouble here. With his weaknesses being fixed, white having the more active king, the more active knight, he chose to play f4. f4 is now an attempt to get active. He's freeing the f5 square. Knight f5 is coming. And potentially there's also the idea of playing f3 at a future date and trying to maybe allow g takes f3 and then have white's structure being weakened. Knight f8 was played. Now the black knight is tied down to defending b6. Oh, not b6, g6, I should rather say. b6 is played by black, chasing the king away. The king comes to d4. Now we get knight f5 check. He's willing to give up the h4 pawn, at least temporarily. The king e4, knight takes h4, comes in with knight e6, and he regains the f pawn. Captures it off the knight, and again, these weaknesses are targeted. g6 and h5. You can't move g6 because h5 will hang. King b5 is played. Is g5 not a good move for black? Because, okay, if we now take the pawn on h5, black can capture the pawn on g2. So how should white react to g5?
Couldn't you just go g3?
G3. Okay, if G3, if I capture your knight on F4, you capture my knight, and this is easily winning for white. Okay, so after G3, I'd probably have to move my knight away, and then you just capture on H5, and it's a free pawn. Okay, maybe I shouldn't put my knight where everyone can take it, which is nowhere. So the knight's also slightly trapped. Okay, very nice. We do always have to note these tactical ideas. You can be as much of a strategic genius as you want playing chess, but if you blunder tactics, you're going to lose. Like, you can be Magnus Carlsen, but if you hang a rook every game, then you're probably like 1200 rated. King b5, though, is played by black. He's getting his king in. He's wanting to get his A and B pawns running. G3, knight comes back to F5, and now G6 falls. So we kind of are going to have some sort of race position happening here. Black plays knight H6, which is a bit of a weird move. He is getting ready to try and defend his pawns. I think I personally would have maybe wanted to try and bring the knight more towards the queen side for an attack, but I think he calculated that and found out it wasn't working, so he tried this rather. White centralizes his knight, king to A4, and now knight to C4. Nicely defending the pawn on A3 and pressuring B6. Black chose to play king B3 here. There is also some other ideas where potentially B5 looks very tempting at first, but white can play knight to A5. And after king takes A3, then he goes knight C6, and one pawn restricts two pawns. Just because black has an extra pawn on this side of the board, it's completely irrelevant. And this knight is protecting the pawn from the other side that the king is. The king's going to need to spend 5 moves to get rid of that knight. And that's way too late. Could have also tried king b5, but then knight b2, and the king is just restricted. So it's always important to calculate these accurately so that you don't just end up losing material to your opponent's active pieces. King b3, though, is what was played, which allows knight takes b6, king takes a3, and now knight d5. So white is now up a clean pawn. King comes to b3, and white starts pushing his pass pawns. Pass pawns are a very powerful asset in these endgames. So pass pawns need to be pushed. King comes to c4, trying to centralize the king and get it active again. Knight c7, king takes b4, knight takes a6, and black chose to give it up here. The reason he's giving it up is simply his king is so terribly placed. He's going to lose this h-pawn, and then 2 connected pawns for a strong grandmaster like Botvinnik is enough to win the game. I do have some notes at the bottom here. So some general advice for knight endings. You want to try to post your pieces as actively as possible. It's very important to get a passed pawn. A passed rook's pawn is especially valuable. Remember, we talked about in the previous example, the passed rook's pawn, the knight can only attack it from one side, and it really struggles to stop it. We want to try to limit the activity of our opponent's knight. That's kind of goes without saying. If we want to get our pieces active, we probably want to restrict our opponent's pieces. And then endings with 4 against 3 on one side offer very good winning chances. On the other hand, endings with fewer pawns, 3 against 2 or 2 against 1, are frequently drawn. You always have these ideas of giving up the knight for the pawn in these endings. Okay, then. I hope you people found that informative. Anyone have some general questions about knight endings, or shall we move along? Welcome to those who have joined a bit late. It's good to have you all here.
I think we're good. We can move on.
Fantastic. We are going to do some quick looks at some outposts, and then we'll do some exercises. So last week we talked about, or Nito talked about weak squares. So if we look at this position, what are the weak squares in this position? Should almost be something that
for white, I mean, like, what weak squares does black have?
I mean, you can give them for both sides if you see some.
Well, d6, f6 and g5 are weak for black.
Yeah, those are definitely squares that our knight would love to profit from. If we're talking
for white, I mean,
yeah, go for it.
Like e4 is quite weak.
E4 is probably the one that sticks out. The only problem is it's kind of hard to get a piece to e4. And even when it's there, it doesn't specifically target any weaknesses. It looks pretty, and it's definitely an improvement over any other square, but it doesn't end the game when the knight lands there. But you did mention d6 and f6. These potentially could end the game. Can we find any way to utilize those weak squares with our knight. Our knights always love these forward outposts, especially in the enemy camp. Again, for those who have showed up, this is an interactive lesson, so you're welcome to unmute yourself if you have any points or type something in the chat. This position is white to move. We are looking for some way that will potentially allow us to utilize those weak dark squares. One more observation about the weak squares. I'd actually say like almost all of black's dark squares are weak, right? Because he's lost his dark square bishop, everything's on light squares. So these are all squares we're potentially looking at trying to get our pieces to. The silence is deafening. Maybe I should pick on someone. Who haven't we heard from? Hannah, Haggai, and Jethro, you got any ideas? Oh, we're getting something in the chat. Mr. Caswin of Bishop E2. Do you have a plan of Bishop E2 that you want to utilize, or are you just suggesting the move? Because Bishop E2 makes a lot of sense. Like, I don't think anyone's going to say Bishop E2 is a bad move, right? You're developing pieces. It's very natural. We, however, want something a bit more energetic. We're not going to get sponsored by Red Bull if we play Bishop E2, you know?
I guess like I can like getting your knight to d6 or f6 is very hard because funny enough, in order to get to a dark square, the knight needs to step on a light square, and all the light squares are protected by pawns.
Yeah.
But you can get into b6 very easily with the knight. I'm not sure if that's helpful with knight to a4.
Yeah.
b6.
Knight a4.
Okay, knight a4 doesn't make sense. Okay. No. I know Haggai and Jethro have the same idea. I think the problem is though he just goes knight d7 and you can't go to b6. That kind of ruins the party a bit. And our other piece that could probably help control these squares is on the other side of the board. So we would have to look at some long rerouting like that. Let me just get rid of notifications here. Should have closed these beforehand, but what can we do? So I like the ideas given. However, what wasn't considered is giving up material to acquire one of these outposts. So at the moment, our opponent's king is in the center. When our opponent's king is in the center, we want to open the center. And quite frankly, sacrifices on d5 should be considered in this position, whether it be for the knight or the rook. We're talking about knights, so odds are we probably don't want to give up our knight. So in this position, what was played was rook takes d5. Giving up a full rook for 2 pawns and an outpost. Black is almost obligated to take this. If he doesn't take it, he's just down a pawn and has a terrible position. After e takes d5, knight d5, and now f6 is acquired. And the moment we get a piece to f6, checkmates are going to come. Queen comes to f7, the queen was hit. White chooses to play bishop c4 first. Now there's a threat of knight f6 winning a queen. Black needs to step out of that, break the discovered attack on his queen of bishop e6. And now knight f6. The king comes to e7. White decides he can trade off this bishop. This bishop is the one good defender of the black king at the moment. So he trades it off. King takes e6. And now the rook comes to d1. So again, white is down a full rook, but his pieces are so well placed. If he plays accurately and with a lot of vigor, he doesn't let his opponent develop, he has good chances, yeah. Game continues with queen f8. Queen f8 is played because black wants to trade queens. And he's also getting very scared of like a rook landing on d6. White does not want to trade queens in this position. We're attacking, we're down a rook. Trading queens would be a death sentence. So he just drops the queen back to h3. And now there's the immediate idea of the queen swinging all the way across here and potentially getting an attack going. Black sees that idea. He feels it's strong enough that he needs to stop it. So he brings his queen to b4 to stop queen b3. And you notice black isn't getting a chance to use these other pieces. He's permanently moving his queen around. And the queen is not a good defender because it's too valuable. You never want to give it up. White plays knight d5, again harassing the queen. The queen comes to c4, queen h4, and black resigns because there's no way to stop the queen coming in to one of these squares. So a very nice combination that white played. To see this combination though, do you need to be a tactical genius? I don't actually think so. Because the moment you start looking at these dark squares, it needs to come across your mind that you would sacrifice a lot to get anything into those dark squares. Because the knight on the 6th rank, it's not a knight, it's an octopus. And an octopus is probably worth more than a knight, right? So that's definitely an interesting problem. Let's look at the next one.
What if
Yeah, sorry, there's a question.
when the rook takes the pawn on d5, what if black doesn't take?
What if black doesn't take? That always needs to be discussed, especially when you're sacrificing a piece of something. What if they don't take? I think I did mention this originally. If he doesn't take, what other move do you want to play? Who wants to suggest? You got a move you think black would play? Let's just say knight c6. Let's say developing, right? You can't go wrong with developing. Now, black has a position where not only is he down a pawn, I think he's down a pawn. Yeah, he's down a pawn. So he's materially at a disadvantage, but he still has all the same problems. All these dark squares are weak, right? The knight's not immediately getting in there. Maybe now we're going to go knight a4 or something, because knight c6 might have been a bit hasty. But white's position is just so good now. Doesn't matter if the sacrifice gets accepted. In fact, in this position, you're almost obligated to take this, even though you see you're probably going to lose, but just to have some chance. You know, maybe white plays a passive move and you get to defend. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Let's move along. So that's a different position. It is, again, white to move. I want you to spend a little bit of time thinking about it. Let's again try and look for weak squares and potential outposts for our knight. And ways I think try to apply some similar ideas that we thought of in the previous position.
Would e6 work?
Okay, e6 is definitely an idea we want to consider. Because again, principally, our opponent's king is in the center, so we should look to open up the center. With e6, though, there's two things you need to calculate. You need to calculate if I take it, and you need to calculate if I play my f6, right? So what are you planning to do if I take this?
There are probably two moves I would play, either rook to d6 or the knight takes the pawn.
Okay, I think if you play rook to d6, can I not maybe just castle? Ooh, kind of feels dodgy. What if I castle?
Maybe you push the queen to h4.
h4, and you try to get an attack going this way. Okay, I think
Or
I
you
like.
push the queen.
Yeah, I think I like what you're doing. It makes a lot of sense. Because you are now just looking to attack on the h file. Yeah, I think this is good. I mean, I would personally prefer to play either knight e6, yeah, to stop castling, or I think queen e5 just wins tactically speaking, because we attack this rook and he can't castle queenside. So if he castles kingside now, we take on e6 and he's very much getting his king mated, yeah. Maybe even like rook d7 ideas because the bishop's pinned. So I think if we play e6, he has to play f6. And what is your plan now?
Maybe I will play knight to f7.
Knight f7. Okay, very good. So now we also want to talk slightly more about outposts. So with outposts, it becomes a case of diminishing returns when you get too far up the board. Let's say we have an outpost on the, I think the 4th rank. If we have an outpost here, it's usually a defensive piece. If we have an outpost on the 5th rank, it's an attacking piece, but it can also be a defensive piece. If we put an outpost on the 6th rank, it's a purely attacking piece. In fact, the 6th rank, if we're looking to attack, is where we would like our outpost. If we put our outpost on the 7th rank, our knight's power is suddenly reduced slightly, right? Because this knight can only move to 6 squares. If we draw arrows, there's 6 squares for our knight. If we had moved this knight back a square, if we had it on f6, then there's 8 squares. So immediately it's like 25% more powerful if it's on the 6th rank. That isn't to say, though, that this is bad. There is a couple of exceptional circumstances that make this very good for us. For one, the black king is forced to go kingside in this position. We can't castle queenside, 1, because of the rook, and 2, we probably end up in a lot of trouble after knight d6. So he chooses to castle kingside. And now the combination of this knight, this g-file, this queen, and potentially the h-pawn will lead to the end of the black king. There's no way he can defend this. So this game was very quick. I think it went knight h6, then king to h8, then e7. Also starts using that advanced e-pawn that black let us keep. Thank you very much. We play the rook to e8. The queen comes into d6, king g7, and now the very nice knight takes f5. What do we play off the g takes f5? Does anyone understand critical chess moves? If you're playing a game and you're crushing your opponent and you get to the position that you know is winning, you need to make sure you play the prettiest move, right? So that when they make your collection of games one day, that everyone will go out and buy it. Also, maybe should have hid the move, but I'm sure you're all honest people.
Is it queen to e6, because then the threat of rook to g,
Yeah,
the g file is
the threat
very
is stronger
powerful
than the
fight.
execution, I think is how we describe this. Because if you just check immediately, I think king f7 and then
Yeah,
swing the
yeah,
rook.
that's how I said you play queen to e6 first.
Yeah. No, it's very good. And the king is now kind of just in a mating net, and there's no way he can save himself. So that's how this game ended. So that's very interesting. I think we'll look at one more of these outburst examples, and then we'll move on to some combinations. Because there's a lot of things we can do with knights, and we want to cover a bit of everything. So this is, I think it's white's move in this position. I want you guys to look for the similar ideas. What is the one theme in all 3 of these positions we've looked at when we've discussed outposts? What is the one common denominator? What do we keep seeing? Is anyone good at spot the difference, spot the similarities? I don't know what it's called. Maybe I need to jog your memory. Let's show the previous example. We had this position. We had this position, and now we have this position. What are the similarities?
That the king's in the center.
Most of the
dark squares are weak.
most of the active squares are black.
Yeah, both of you are correct. The king is in the center is 1, and then the dark squares are weak. In all of these positions, black has put all their pawns on light squares and then traded off their dark square bishop. Whenever you're putting your pawns on light squares, your dark square bishop, he gains value. He's needed to protect your dark squares. Whereas that hasn't been the case in these examples. Okay, so now that we know what we're potentially looking for, can anyone come up with some ideas for white to potentially exploit these weak dark squares? Let me actually put a time on. Let me give you guys, shall we say 2 minutes to come up with some answers? I don't want to hear any answers before that. If you think you're a genius and found everything in 20 seconds, then you can wait and, I don't know, write a book about how great you are. Oh yeah, that's been roughly 2 minutes. Does anyone have some ideas they'd like to share?
I have an idea.
Okay, Mr. Rowan, what's your plan?
Bishop takes b5. Check.
Bishop takes b5, check. Think you might have missed that I can take that with my pawn.
Yeah, fascinating. Now I thought that I should take with the d knight because I'm hitting a queen. And
Okay,
and
let's see. You're hitting my queen and?
well, I'm not sure where you want to move your queen. I thought the best spot would be trying to move it to e6 to try and trade queens.
On e7, yeah. That also
But then I
what I
come
would think.
Knight to d6 check.
And then you win a piece, right? After you trade queens. Trades, 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 and at the end of the day, we have 2 extra pawns. Okay, that seems quite nice. Do I have anything better to refute this idea? Because the main thing is we need to see.
Go for the few moves.
Sorry, what was that?
May go for the few moves.
I'm gonna go forward. In which position? Are we talking bishop takes, pawn takes? We were saying knight takes, and queen e7. What are you saying?
Then please go for another few moves.
Another few moves. How many moves do we want to see? This is all the moves there were.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then couldn't black play queen h6?
You mean white play queen h6?
Yes, white play queen h6.
And I presume your dream now is I go king g8, you take my bishop, I take your bishop, and then you checkmate me. That would be cool. Yeah, I think this is very playable.
But the thing is, you block with the knight. Yeah.
That's you still take the bishop though.
You can still take the. Yeah.
And
King is an escape square.
we have an
If you're
escape
losing the
square, but
rook.
we lose the rook, right? So yeah, I think this does work. When I stopped the analysis was because I just saw queen takes e7, king takes, and you can look at this position and be like, white is 100% better. Yeah, he has 2 extra pawns, he has better pieces. Your line, I'm sure, also works. Like, there's a position, there's always that saying, I can't remember who said it, where he's looking at the position and he can't find a move that loses. I feel like that kind of sums it up. I just wanted to look quickly if I had something better. I probably have to take, because all of that was revolving around me going queen e7 and not having a fun time. So let's change it up. Let's go queen b6 maybe. How does this work? You probably still want to go knight d6, I presume. Probably. And then after knight d6, king f8. What are you doing? Probably the same thing we did in the previous position. Or are we? Not actually.
See, I think you may like the D8 square is where I'm trying to get to.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if I could capture rook, but then king to G7. Um,
Yeah, it's tricky. And now if you check me on H6, I just go king E7. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the best way of doing things. I mean, I'm sure you're probably still winning, but there's actually is a more decisive way of doing this, not the variation we're gonna look at. Believe the move wasn't, I think it's just, yeah, I have the move order right as 96. It's the crushing move, which basically it's doing what you guys are doing, except it's giving up a piece, so it's a lot cooler. And it's opening up this F file. There's a lot of ideas can happen there. So if the knight takes B5 now if we try queen B6, we check here and our rook's coming in on the F file and it's gonna be over very quickly. I think your guys' variation also works. In the game, they play something even more different. They just take with the knight, which, okay, after A takes B5, knight takes B5, and once again, we're gonna start utilizing this D6 square. Queen comes to B6, knight D6 check, king F8, bishop C4, completing development, maybe even being tempted to play bishop E6 next move. H6 is played, threatening the queen. The queen comes back to G4. King G7. Black is starting to think he's getting out. The rook comes to F1, targeting F7. We get king rook to F8. Bishop D3, changing tune and pressuring G6. What is bishop D3 threatening? White is a threat here. Probably has a lot of threats. Can someone name one of them?
Bishop takes G.
Bishop takes. I
I-
wouldn't be my first thought. I
yeah.
think there's something better.
I think either rook takes F7 or knight takes F7. One of the two.
Knight takes F7 and then followed by whatever the black does, followed by check
Yeah,
after king taking G6.
yeah, that does look very strong.
Then
I
you
think it might be
protect your
better
knight.
to take with the rook.
Yeah,
though,
I was
'cause
gonna
it's
say with the
back.
rook, so that's forced because he's now in check. Yeah.
But yeah, knight takes F7 also. Sorry, I did miss some messages in the chat earlier by the P-Ware, which was talking about Queen H6, which yeah, I think is similar to what Haggai was saying. So I do apologize for that. I'll try a bit harder not to miss things. In this game, though, Queen E3 check was played instead of allowing that threat. King came to B1, and the queen came to G5. Which, okay, is kind of the most boring way this game could end, because it just ends with a queen trade and they take the bishop, and in the end, white's up 2 pawns, and he has a very, very winning position. So, okay. I think that's all we're going to cover with outposts for now. There is a lot of cool examples you can see of games where outposts play a huge part. Do I have some notes on outposts? Okay, let me have a look here. I thought I had some notes somewhere else, but yeah, often you'll see people are willing to sacrifice a rook for a knight that reaches some powerful square. That's just how valuable knights can be. I remember when I was first learning chess, my coach taught me that if you get a knight on the 6th rank protected by a pawn, it's just worth a rook. And that was just the whole analysis of outposts. Okay, what we're going to do now for a bit, since I've been talking a lot, my voice is running out, we're going to solve some exercises. These are general tactical puzzles. Some of them have some elements of strategy, but most of them are tactical. So I think whenever someone has an answer or just a variation they think is interesting, or something they want to share with everyone, they're welcome to just spit it out. This is black to play, and we need to find the best move. When I say find the best move, it could be anything. Could be a checkmate, could be a fork, could be a gaining a strategic square. When you're playing a real game, no one's going to tell you what you're looking for. So, black to move.
I wanna say rook f1 check.
Rook f1 check. Mr. Kutzrow, the tactical genius. If I play rook takes f1,
Then queen c5 check.
queen c5 check. And this is a pattern everyone gets familiarized with at some point, right? Our smothered mate, which you show this to people for the first time and they think you're really smart at chess, but then it gets to the point where everyone knows it. Yeah.
Please let me go back.
Yeah. Where do you want to talk
Couldn't you
about?
play queen? The king moves to h1.
King h1.
Didn't you play queen g?
Sorry, you cut out.
Queen
there.
g1.
Queen g1. Hey, this is cool. This is just a quicker way, and we're gonna smother mate him after he takes with the rook. The problem is maybe our opponent's not as friendly as we want him to be. If he takes with the rook, we'll play knight gr and be like checkmate, and everything will be cool. Problem is he's gonna take off the king and laugh at us, and we'll feel a little bit silly. You have the right idea. You just gotta throw in the check first, like the Kutzrow was saying. Because now if rook takes, then you have a back rank checkmate. If he blocks with this rook, you must just take with the rook so that you have two pieces attacking f1. And if the king moves, now we get our smothered mate pattern where this knight protects the queen. Okay, so that's a relatively easy one to get us started. This is white to move, actually. Yeah, and black is running this way. First thing you should do when you look at a chess position is work out whose move it is and which way they go. It's white to play.
I've seen this puzzle before, so I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah, I lost all my originality points. I didn't actually think you were there when I showed this puzzle, which probably means I've showed this multiple times, but hey.
Yes, you got it more than once.
Okay, so what is white's biggest problem in this position?
That black
the
has
path-
105 pawns.
Something like that. And we need a way to stop those pawns. These pawns, they're stopped by our bishop. The bigger problem is this a pawn.
Yeah, I was thinking, obviously, like the obvious knight checks and stuff. Black just takes your c pawn, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking like king a5.
Yeah.
He pushes. If he takes your pawn, you take his pawn, and I doubt he's promoting any other pawn on the board.
Okay, so he probably has
If
to
he pushes, yeah, I chase it again.
King a4, and then if I push again?
I come to king to b4, b3. Why did I say 4?
B3.
b3, and I'm protecting the pawn, and I'm threatening checkmate.
And we're threatening this idea of knight to e6 with checkmate. So that is a very nice idea. It's important to see the mate. And if I hit you with some slick under promotion, that would be cool.
Very clever. I just play king to c3.
King c3, and there's no way I can stop knight e6.
I did consider that. See, I'm a smart
Yeah.
boy.
Yep, you are very smart. That is a nice combination. The key to this problem is that you need to see the mating net, and you need to understand that there's basically no way to stop the pawn other than trying to find this mating net. People are too good. Okay, I got another couple of fun ones. So this one is white to play again. Hopefully no one has seen this one, though I'm pretty sure I showed this with the other one. So there goes that hope. White to play and find the best move.
I know this one also. I wish it happens in my real games.
Yeah, you would feel smart if you played this in one of your games.
Did I miss a class or something? Because Kuzma knows all of these and I haven't seen these.
I mean, maybe Takutsua just has a better
We've done
memory.
this a lot of times.
No, there is some other classes we do as well, which I think is where Takutsu was getting it. Also, this might have been used for one of our intermediate sessions by Takutsu herself.
Ah, I see.
Is it possible if you could jump the knight to f4, attacking the rook, then that could also give you time to jump the knight like somewhere either on g6 or
Okay, so you're proposing knight to f4, and that's going to give us time to get our knight to one of these nice squares. I mean, I think the problem is he takes this with check. Then we probably have to move our king, and then off the rook just comes out, right? And I don't think getting our knight to these squares achieves much. Unless there's something I'm missing. So that is a nice idea. Maybe if you calculate it a bit deeper, it might bear fruit. Who knows? But we do have to calculate this deeply.
okay. Or maybe stop. Or maybe you could play king g2 first, then you can go for knight f4.
The problem with king g2 is he plays rook takes h5, right? And we play king g2, rook h5, and we kind of wish we had this pawn. Because a lot of our play is revolving around this rook maybe being stuck. Whereas now if we go knight f4, he probably just plays something like rook e5. Now this rook is getting active. We can never allow it to come to e2, and things might go a bit southwest. Definitely keep looking at trying to trap that rook, though. I see somebody saying in chat, wow, somebody please help that dog in the background. Yeah, that was a noisy dog. At least I hope it was a dog.
Play g4.
G4, the next great attempt. The problem is G4 hangs the F pawn, right? There's this great saying, but when you move a piece, it's not where it was. When we move the G pawn, F3 drops. This is actually a very nice position. I believe it's from a study. I don't think this happened in a game. Gets boring just sitting here though. Who wants to give me some answer or just tell me what they're calculating?
Someone did comment in the chat if you want to talk to them.
Oh yeah. I keep asking for people to talk to me and then I ignore everyone who talks to me. H6. I'm not actually sure what we're trying to do with H6. So I presume just rook takes H6 and now his rook's coming out, right? Maybe do you have some trick where you want him to take with the pawn? Maybe. But even then, ooh, is this almost a trick? This is almost very tricky, I think. Trying to work out what move order you're thinking of. So I see you wanting to trap this rook, but I think it gets out, even if I take with the pawn, which I probably won't. I'll just take with the rook, and then a lot of problems disappear. Okay, let me give one helpful hint. Knight f4 is the first move. You guys work out the rest.
Could you play H?
Sorry, what was that? I think you muted yourself before I could hear your full sentence.
Oh wait, I think I've got it.
I think you've got it. Okay, so what's happening here? Talk me through it.
So obviously rook takes g2 is forced. King f2.
And then rook g5 has to be played.
Yeah, and then knight to e6.
Yeah, so this is about where the other person who is giving a variation calculated it to, which you always need to look like one move further. That's often the trick to solving these. Knight e6. So I cannot take this pawn because I'm going to get forked.
Yes, you can't come to f5 for the same reason.
So I have to go to e5.
Yes. It's calculating d5. You've got the knight to c. What's it? c7 check as well.
Okay.
But
what from here?
I thought f4 was trapping the rook.
But rook e4.
Yeah, see now that he's got e4,
yeah, that's uncomfortable. Do we have anything further from there? So close. Sorry, I think I heard pawn f4, right? Pawn f4, and then off the rook e4. What's the plan off the rook e4? Those who attended Denise Bower's lecture a few months back, what's it? This is probably the move that gives away that it's a study, right? The answer is b3.
Yeah, it's b3. Yeah.
And we have Zugzwang, which in German means compelled to move. And black is very much Zugzwanged. There's nowhere to put the rook. The rook is effectively trapped in the middle of the board. If he moves g6, we probably just take it and then we go make a queen. If he moves the king to either one of these squares, we can fork the rook. So a very nice problem that requires us to calculate accurately. A lot of these positions with knights, you have to calculate accurately. The general principles in that often won't apply. Accurate calculation is always what you need. Okay, we got a couple more exercises and then we'll look at a game or two if we have time. So this is white to play again and find the best move.
You like these bishop and knight tactics, don't you?
Yeah, I'm unoriginal. I think it's fun. It's these study-esque positions where you have to calculate things. Otherwise, people just like, if you tell them they're looking for a knight move, they just instantly look at the knights and they see how they can give their knight away for some cool sacrifice.
Can bishop f6 work?
Okay, bishop f6. Probably, I think the only move we need to consider, because otherwise this pawn is making a queen. So bishop f6. Is black just losing? Black has 2 less pieces. So
I calculated black plays d4.
d4 is forced. Now is how we're stopping this queen. So
We don't stop it. We attack.
We attack. Attack is the best defense. So who was speaking previously? Is it Tagai speaking? So I know there's like 3 of you on the Zoom. Well, never know. Okay. Do you have a plan for attack, Rowan?
I was wondering if they wanted to finish their thoughts or not.
Seemed to have
But
disappeared.
yeah, I do have a plan. Knight to f3.
Knight to f3. Okay. So if I just go and make a queen now?
I'm gonna play bishop takes with check.
Bishop takes with check. And that's not exactly too much fun. Can I play this?
You can, and then knight takes, and after king takes, I play king to g4, and I'm gonna go after your h4.
You promote before I do. Okay, then I guess, do I have another idea? I think I do somewhere. What was my other idea? Do I not have another idea? I'm trying to remember. I think there was some reason this wasn't too great, but I can't remember why, which means it must be great. Maybe this works as well. How does this go? If you take here, it takes, and you're winning this position, right? Or are you not? I flicked on the evaluation bar, and that says to me a bunch of zeros. After king g4, I can probably take you. King g5, king up, king here. Takes. And okay, the move I think I missed was king g5. Is this how we do it? How do we do this? h6? I'm lost, though, right? How am I supposed to do this? It's not so easy.
No. I see it. It's king f6 here.
After king takes h7, are we going king f6?
Oh, I thought it was black to move. But yes,
but
still,
I think it does,
yeah.
right? Yeah, because king g8 loses to king g5, and if we push the pawn, now we get this position where the king can't
yeah.
get. Okay,
Yep.
Interesting stuff. I should have known that variation a little bit better, but apparently that's not how we do it. So knight f3 not good enough. No, we just need to find a way to make an improvement on that idea.
I don't know if you can hear me, but I was thinking, how about bishop takes first at this position?
Bishop
I don't know if it
takes
works.
first.
Bishop, yeah.
Again, after king takes.
I don't know. I was sort of thinking that you could try to get your knight somewhere in there, like knight
Okay,
e2 somewhere.
trying to use the tempo. I'm not exactly seeing how it's working. I like the idea. But again, we have a similar problem where our knight can't stop the rook pawn ever, right? Knights struggle to stop the rook pawn.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, because yeah. See, okay, now I see that it doesn't.
Okay, no, thanks for the suggestion. Search goes on. I'll maybe give it 2 more minutes because I would like to look at one more game before we call it an evening. Okay, does anyone want to save us from defeat or shall we look at the answer? Yeah. 92. What is the difference though of 92? Because if we queen of a1 equals queen now, we're still going to draw if we take on d4. However, we have another brilliant idea. Knight c1. This is the study-esque move, which I believe is what trips a lot of people up. So how does this work? If we take the knight on c1, I presume bishop g5 and we're getting the skewer. That's not an option. What else is possible for black? Because we still have the same idea of checkmate. And
is it okay if, like, when the knight is on e2, is it okay if, for example, the bishop would take, check, then the queen has to take, then the knight takes, then the king takes, then you move to f4. F4.
I believe we looked at this. This is the same as the previous position.
Then if he takes, you don't move to g5, you can move to f5. The king goes to f4.
Doesn't make a difference though.
Yeah.
Then you move to f6.
I don't think it makes a difference. Right? Because if you go take the pawn still, what do you want to play here? Or is this making a
You
difference?
play h6.
Yeah, you play h6. It's not though. Yeah.
It's not because
Okay.
it's a little tricky, but you just play
King e6, and after you take on h7, king f7. This is basically the same as Rowan's variation given. Knight c1 needs to be played, and it's very hard for black to stop the ideas. In the game, queen a5, or I don't know if it's the game actually, that probably wasn't a game. This is just the variation given, which is to stop bishop e5, but then we get bishop d4, king takes d4, and knight b3. A very nice tactic. So, okay, this is a difficult one. That was, maybe I didn't expect you guys to solve it too much, but solving studies is probably the easiest way to improve your calculation abilities. I think there's a book, it's like Dominion in like 5,000 endgames. That is a ton of problems like this, which if you're a serious player wanting to improve your calculation, I would thoroughly recommend. Okay, we have a few more minutes. I want to show one more game and then we're going to call it an evening. This game is less here for its, shall we say, instructive brilliance, and more just here because I thought it was a cool game. So we have, shall I try to pronounce names here? Peter Petrovich Potemkin. I am not pronouncing that right, against Mr. Alexander Aliekin. Aliekin is probably more familiar with most of you people. I've never heard of the player playing white. We get a Sicilian with g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7. This is the Lasker Dunn attack, apparently. Knight e2, knight c6, normal developing move, c3, knight f6, knight a3. So the idea of knight a3 is he's going to put the knight on c2 and try to play d4. Black plays d5 himself, taking the opportunity to strike in the center. E takes d5, knight takes d5, and now the knight comes back to c2. So white is playing quite a funky setup. Black just calmly castles. White plays d4. We get c takes d4, c takes d4, and now bishop g4. White should probably just look to castle here or try and unpin his knight somehow. However, he plays f3. f3 weakens the e3 square a lot, and potentially this whole diagonal. Grandmaster Ben Feingold, he does a lot of lectures on YouTube, and that he always has a saying how you must never play f3. And okay, it's completely not true. There is obviously cases where you want to play f3, but it's a good rule in general. Bishop drops back to f5. We get knight e3. Black continues with queen a5, attacking the king once more. The king now has to go uncastled, or he doesn't have to, but it's very recommended. If he plays a knight bishop d2, he's going to drop the knight on e3 because there's a pin going on. Okay, off the king of 2. We get knight to b4, potentially eyeing out the c2 square and the d3 square. Black's knights are starting to prance into all these weak squares. White chooses to play knight takes f5. Black recaptures of the queen, and g4 is played to chase the queen away. Black first uses his opportunity now to play knight d3, and the king goes to g3. And now I want you guys to come up with a move for black. And given the topic of tonight's session, I have faith that someone will find it. Or you might have seen this game. This is quite a famous game. It's black to move. Anyone have an idea? No one. Everyone falling asleep. They not had enough coffee. I think I heard the answer there. What is your plan after he captures back? If he captures our queen, I mean. Maybe I didn't hear the answer and I'm going crazy.
Bishop. E5 check.
So your microphone's very soft. I think you said bishop e5 check. If I just capture this. No, I don't think you're achieving too much. Because if the best you have is taking, yeah, I can block on f4 with the bishop. It is a nice idea. We are looking for ways to try and exploit that king's position. And maybe sacrifice our queen.
Yeah, I was thinking about something like knight takes d4,
Knight d4 if I take the queen.
then knight takes check. But I was trying to see where all the moves that the king can go to. You know, it's a lot
Yeah.
of squares.
It's difficult to visualize at first.
Like h3. I mean, like you've got king to f2, and you could try and get your queen back, I guess.
The thing is, you're playing
No, no, that's just mate. That's
you're
just
not
mate.
seeing that it's mate.
Yeah,
Which is kind
mate.
of funny.
Sorry.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
it's hard.
no, it's a very
But,
nice pattern.
Then
But I
king.
presume your holdback is that he's not necessarily capturing our knight. No, I mean
Yeah,
capturing our
necessarily
queen.
capturing our queen. Yeah.
Which I think what happens here? What happens if we capture this?
And then we can come with bishop to e5
Yeah,
check.
and this is just mating. If you play f4, I can capture it. If you go to h3, now this is happening, and I don't know if there's a checkmate. There might not be. Is there a checkmate?
Yeah, bishop back.
Bishop back and yeah, king back, and we can maybe just grab the rook even if we want to. I don't think there's a
Or the
mate.
queen.
If we grab the
Take the
queen, though, our queen hangs. That's why I wanted to take off check.
Oh.
But yeah,
I see.
the game ended with a nice pretty mate, which is why we're seeing it. I think that is also where we're going to end our session. I will quickly just recap some of the stuff we looked at. We looked at knight endings at the start, where we talked about their similarity to pawn endings, how activity is a big priority, and also how knights can struggle to prevent pass pawns. We talked about knight combinations towards the end here with some tactics. You always need to be good at tactics. You're never going to see a strong player that's bad at tactics. And then we talked about outposts for knights, identifying weak squares and often how much we're willing to sacrifice to get our pieces to those weak squares. Is there any questions, or shall we call it an evening there? Okay, I presume there's no questions. Thank you everyone for coming and sacrificing your Thursday night to come for chess. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Pleasure. Have a good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Michael. Yeah, thanks, bro.
Pleasure, guys.